Hello and welcome to the Cipher Brief. And I would like to welcome Katarina Tras, who's the Defense and Security Policy Analyst based in Sweden. Katarina, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Yeah.
We're going to talk about all things related to the Baltic Sea and the Russian hybrid operations there. But to get into details of it, tell us what's happening. Tell us what you see from your vantage point, whether it's the hybrid operations or specific examples that you can give us, and then we'll go into the details of this.
So what we have seen and if we backtrack and look at a larger context, the Baltic Sea for at least the past 10 years, but possibly longer than that, perhaps up to 15 years or even longer now, um, has seen increased what we call hybrid activities. And these are actions, as you know, that are right below the threshold of war. So low intensity activities that have intensified over the past years and significantly intensified since Russia's full scale invasion of Ukraine. So they are often called low intensity warfare, but if you put them all together, it's not really low intensity anymore. What we're seeing now in the Baltic Sea are cable ruptures on a monthly basis. In the past few months at least, but they are backtracking longer than that, and they sort of fit this pattern of low intensity warfare or hybrid activities, as they're known as.
And to remind the viewers, we have some 11 cables cut in the past, 18 months, and four ships have been suspected of participating in some sort of sabotage operation. Let's talk about who's doing this. We've had information about the Russian ships, about Chinese ships. What do you see? What's your view?
What is typical in these cases, and what is typical for these types of activities, that it's always difficult to state one obvious perpetrator, one obvious culpable. So what we have seen in case of the cable cuts, and you mentioned it's 11 cables. It's at least six different occasions, four in the Baltic Sea in the past 18 months, but also two occasions in the near Arctic outside of Lofoten, Västerålen. That was the first cable cut in April 2021. And then the second one in January 2022, just outside of Norwegian Svalbard in the high north in the Arctic. So together there's fairly a number. And what has been typical for all of these, it's that it's been impossible to designate one sure perpetrator with 100% certainty. There has been a lot pointing to certain perpetrators. In the cases in the Arctic, for instance, there were Russian fishing vessels crossing the area on multiple times. I believe outside of Svalbard, it was more than 100 times, up to 150 times in a short period, fishing vessels going back and forth above the area where the cable was damaged. Similar pattern outside of Lofoten, Västerålen. In the Baltic Sea, we have seen sometimes Chinese ships. Yipeng Free was the most recent case in Sweden, but also in the incident that occurred in October 2023 that involved cables connecting Finland, Estonia, and Sweden. That was also a Chinese vessel. We cannot say with definite certainty who was behind, who was the instigator of these events, but that's what we know for sure. There have been vessels connected to the Russian shadow fleet, the Eagle S, that was is believed to be responsible for the cable cut in December last year. Is connected to the Russian shadow fleet. And this last ship that is involved in the incident that occurred just a few days ago on January 26th is registered on Malta, and we don't know so much more about it yet. So a variety of actors, but I would say that it has the Russian footprints on it when it comes to methodology and the means being used.
Well, it's obvious that they want to disrupt the communications and energy, electricity. But on a larger scale, if you step back, how do they benefit?
So when it comes to China, we have two suspected Chinese vessels. We don't know if they have sort of acted on their own, uh, or if they have acted on any directive from above. They can have been used as Russian proxies. Also, is one theory that sort of fits the Russian pattern. If you look at what they benefit from this, well, these are sub-threshold activities. They are at low cost. They are easy to plan, easy to carry through, and so far they have come at zero cost for the perpetrator. So it's a very easy ways of causing problems without getting called out for it and without having significant consequences. And what we have seen with Russia focusing more and more military assets on Ukraine, the dynamics in the region, in the Nordic Baltic region, but also in the Arctic region, have shifted, and we have seen more types of incidents that are hybrid in nature as response to that. I mean, these cable cuts, they fit a pattern, like I mentioned before, with other hybrid activities. We have seen a dramatic increase in GPS jamming, for instance, in the Nordic Baltic region, in the Baltic Sea specifically. We have seen harassments of research vessels in the Arctic outside of Svalbard. Um, so various types of activities that are not directly military in nature, but they are easy to carry through and come at a low or no cost at all.
Mhm. NATO has started to very actively talk about gray zones, as NATO calls it, but what it means in reality is those hybrid operations that you're talking about, which stop short of military operation or short of requiring a military response from NATO. How do you see that effort on the NATO side? Do you think something more can be done? And do you think NATO is united in this?
Well, after these past two incidents, a NATO effort has actually started, the Baltic Sentry, a NATO operation that aims to increasing the presence in the Baltic region. I think that is a step in the right direction, but I'm not sure that it will deter these actors enough. Because the Baltic Sea is it's small. It's a small sea. It's a small ocean, but it's still a rather large area, and you have massive traffic in this small area. So it will be difficult with a traditional military presence to keep that presence that is needed in order to deter and call out these actors. In addition, naval forces of the allies in the region have been heavily underfinanced for decades and are in need of large scale investments. And I would say that that goes for all of the countries in the region. So I think that only traditional military presence will not be enough. I think we need robustness in order to deter. We need to have a robust grid of cables, for instance. So if one action happens to one or two cables, that will not have a significant impact on the grid as a whole, whether it comes to electricity or communication or other critical infrastructure. Um, I also think that technological developments are key here. Surveillance, and that is in all domains, underwater, on the surface, and in the air as well. I think that developments and investments in autonomous systems, specifically underwater systems, but also in radar and sensors, will be a critical part of this deterrence to call out the perpetrators at an early phase and hopefully to deter them before starting these type of actions.
The future of national security is here. Introducing the Cipher Brief's NatSec Edge Conference, June 5th through 6th, 2025 in Austin, Texas. Join leaders from intelligence, defense, private industry, and investment as they explore the innovations shaping tomorrow's world. Gain critical insights, connect with top minds, and shape the future of security in an interconnected world. Don't just witness the future, be a part of it. Secure your spot now at natsekedge.com.
Sweden arrested a Russian ship that's again suspected in cutting this latest cable on January 26th. What happens after this? Once the ship is arrested, what's the process? Who's investigating? Is it NATO? Is it Sweden? Walk us through that process. And maybe if you would like to add more context to it, Is this the first one that was arrested, or we have other cases and so forth?
And so, just one detail about this last event: this ship is registered in Malta, and that is about as much as we know about the owners so far. So we can't say with 100% that it's Russian, as you mentioned. There was a process in November last year with a Chinese vessel, Yi Peng Free, where the Swedish authorities told the vessel to not leave the Baltic, and it stayed for quite a number of weeks. First, there was a negotiation about boarding or not boarding. Uh, in the end, Swedish authorities were allowed to enter to carry out and is to start an investigation. But the Swedish, um, I don't know the exact English title here, but the prosecutor general, you would call him, or the state prosecutor, was not allowed to enter the ship, and that, of course, made a significantly hindered the investigation. So it was hard to carry it out fully here. For the last two cable cuts, we have seen a lot more decisive action and a lot more um, forceful action from the beginning. In the Finnish case, the Finnish authorities boarded and escorted the Eagle S ship on December 25th last year for further investigation. And the same thing happened to the now Malta registered ship, but from part of Swedish authorities on January 26th, where the Swedish police task force boarded the ship and escorted it to a Swedish port for investigation. So far, it seems that this becomes a matter of national law enforcement. And it was national law enforcement in the Swedish case that boarded the ship. So it's a police investigation that will continue. But I think that this action of at an early phase meeting and boarding these suspected vessels is key here, and I think that's a key part of future deterrence as well.
Do you see a possibility of escalation in this regard? What can happen? What's the worst case scenario that you worry about?
I think the worst case scenario is that we have seen several spy ships operating in the region that are part of Russia's shadow fleet, but are de facto Russian spy ships, also with armed personnel. There has been a number of those, and there's been journalistic efforts that have sort of called them out and been encountered by men in wearing uniforms and weapons aboard. So the worst thing that can happen, I believe, if in case there was a boarding, that some sort of event would an unforeseen event would start a chain reaction of other unforeseen events that escalates violence. That would be a real crisis. So that's what I believe is sort of the worst case scenario. Besides that, I think that this is the good way to go about to board them at an early stage using national police and law enforcement um, as the tool here.
Yeah, and there is a concern that some of the ships are not just sabotaging the communication, underwater communications and critical infrastructure, but they are also spy ships equipped with radars, sonars, and taking high resolution pictures of the Baltic Sea. Do you think that has implication? Why do you think that's happening, and why are we seeing the increase of that so much now?
We have seen an increase of sort of open actions like these. I mean, they remain under the threshold uh, for 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 war activities, but they're pretty open and pretty blatant. And I think that again relates back to the strategy of using hybrid measures as a military tool. And we see the increase of it after the full scale invasion of Ukraine. So I think that the increase also that we've seen in spy ships, for instance, in the Baltic Sea, but also in the Arctic with direct harassment of research vessels, for instance, it fits into that strategy. It's not direct military force, but it can be, at least from the Russian side, be perceived as rather effective and a way of demonstrating presence, and also a way of demonstrating intent, if you may. So it can be calculated as a rather effective means of warfare that is not really warfare.
Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. And we were talking to Katarina Tras, who's Defense and Security Policy Analyst based in Sweden. Thanks very much, Katarina.
Thank you, Iya.